It's funny, the things you learn to live with. You learn to live with the sound of a key fumbling in a lock at 3 in the morning. You learn to distinguish the type of fumbling. Is it tired and rushing in, or is it drunk and can't find the hole? Tonight, like most nights, it was a latter. I didn't even flinch when the door finally creaked open and then slammed against the interior wall with a bang that shook the picture frames in the hallway. I heard the thud of her purse hitting the floor, a sound that, to me, always sounded like punctuation, like an exclamation mark on a sentence I was tired of reading. I didn't say a word. I just sat there in the dark, my favorite armchair, one leg crossed over the other. The only light in the room was the cold blue flicker of the TV, stuck on some 24-hour news channel with the volume on mute. I'd been there since midnight, just watching the cheering scroll, telling me about a world on fire while my own little world was just smoldering. Madison staggered in, her heels clicking an uneven, syncopated rhythm on the hardwood floor. Click-drag, click-drag. The air in the room, which had just been stale and quiet, was suddenly thick with her, a cloud of expensive, floral perfume trying and failing to mask the stale, acrid scent of club smoke and vodka tonics. A laugh, too loud, too sharp, escaped her lips as she fumbled with the strap of her dress, her back to me. She hadn't even seen me yet. She was a performance, always, even for an audience of one, or, in this case, what she assumed was an audience of 0. Her eyes, glassy and bright, finally caught mine in the reflection of the dark TV screen. She jumped, a little theatrical gasp, one hand flying her chest. "Oh," she said. Her voice was slurred, but underneath the alcohol was that familiar, smug condescension. That tone she saved just for me. "Didn't know you were still up, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word landed like a shard of glass in my chest. It used to mean something. Years ago, it was whisper in the dark when we were building this life. Now it was a weapon, a little verbal shiv she liked to twist, just to see if I'd bleed. I let the silence stretch. I let her stand there, wobbling, her bravado starting to curdle into annoyance. Finally I spoke. My voice was even, quiet, colder than I meant it to be. But I was so tired of yelling. "You've been out since 7, Madison." "It's almost 3, she countered, as if that explained anything. She shrugged, a motion that almost sent her toppling over, and kicked off one expensive heel, then the other. They landed on the floor with a clatter. Time flies when you're not stuck in this dead house. She waved a hand around, dismissing the walls I'd painted, the floor I'd refinished. "Stuck with your dead energy." The way she said it, like she was daring me to respond, lit something in me. Not a bonfire, not anymore. Just a cold pilot light of resolve that had been burning low for months. I stood up, slowly, uncrossing my legs. The armchair groaned in the quiet. "You're drunk," I said, stating the obvious. "And you're boring." That hit a nerve. Her eyes narrowed. But instead of fighting, she flopped onto the couch, legs splayed like a defiant teenager, daring her parents to discipline her. "I needed a break," she spat, the words heavy with contempt. "I needed a break from your constant, suffocating, pity-party energy." My fists clenched at my sides, the knuckles cracking in the stillness. But I kept my voice cool, almost conversational. "You needed a break." I nodded, as if considering it. "So you took the rent money, and you went to the Velvet Room to get a break, dancing with those new friends of yours?" Madison laughed. A real, head tossed back, throat-baring laugh. "Rent money? Oh, please, Daniel." She sat up, her eyes gleaming with a kind of cruel victory. "Don't be so dramatic. Your wounded pride is worth more than that lousy check you bring in every 2 weeks. I stepped forward, the blue light of the TV flickering across my face. My heart was thudding, a heavy, painful beat against my ribs. Lousy check. That check that paid for this dead house. That check that, for 2 straight years, paid her parents' mortgage when her father lost his job. That check that I earned while she found herself. And I'd found this. That lousy check, I said, my voice dangerously low, paid your parents' mortgage, Madison, for 2 years. And they still think you're the successful one, and I'm the leech who married into their good name." She snapped, her face twisting. The smugness was gone, replaced by a raw, ugly fury. "Isn't that funny?" she hissed. It wasn't funny. Not when I'd skipped 2 promotions. Promotions that would have meant moving, meant uprooting her niche boutique idea, just to support her dreams. Dreams that, it turned out, mostly involved daytime mimosas and networking events that were just excuses to dress up, It wasn't funny when I'd sold my truck, my grandfather's truck, the one thing I'd kept that was just mine, to cover her mom's unexpected medical bills. Bills that Madison had promised her parents she would handle, with money she never had. I used to think love was sacrifice. I used to think that was the whole point. You give until it hurts, and then you give a little more, because that's what a good man does. But standing there tonight, breathing in the smell of her betrayal, I realized it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a transaction. And I had been conned from day one. You know what? I said quietly. The anger was gone. It had burned out, leaving behind something clean and cold. I can't wait for tomorrow. She blinked. The insult she was clearly forming died on her lips. She tilted her head, trying to find the angle, the trap. Oh, she slurred. What's tomorrow, sweetheart? I met her gaze. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I held her, pinned in place with just my eyes. Divorce court. For a beat. Just one. The entire universe held its breath. I saw her freeze. I saw the real Madison, the one behind the perfume and the bravado and the borrowed confidence. I saw the flash of pure, undiluted panic. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. She let out a mocking laugh. But this one was different. It was brittle, it was sharp, and it was so venomous it sliced through me sharper than any curse. You think I'm scared of that? She taunted. She pushed herself up from the couch, teetering on her bare feet, fueled by a sudden rush of adrenaline and ego. You think I'll just hand you what you want? That I'll make it easy for you? Please, Daniel. She stalked toward the bedroom, grabbing the doorframe to steady herself. She turned, her face a mask of contempt. You're not the one leaving me, she snarled. I'm the one done with you. She spun around and slammed the bedroom door. She slammed it so hard the walls shook. The picture frames in the hall rattled again, a final, violent punctuation. And still, I stood there in the dark. My hands, I realized, were trembling, not from fear, not from sadness, but from something darker, something old, something that had been buried beneath years of compromise and guilt and second chances she never, ever deserved. Outside, the cicadas buzzed, a relentless, static-filled sound. Inside, I breathed in the silence she left behind. It was the first clean breath I'd taken in years. I had a life once. A simple one, maybe, but it was honest. I worked construction in the Texas heat. Came home with blistered hands and sawdust in my hair. I ate dinner on a scratched-up pine table I'd built myself. And Madison used to meet me at the door barefoot, wearing one of my old paint-stained T-shirts, grinning like I was the only man on earth. But somewhere between her chasing bottle service and me chasing stability, something broke. And tonight, I finally knew it wasn't coming back. Let her laugh. Let her slam all the doors in this house. Because tomorrow, she'd walk into that courthouse thinking she still held all the cards, ready for a fight. She didn't know. She didn't know I'd already folded the hand. I'd already walked away from the table. The courthouse smelled exactly like you'd expect. Not like justice or truth or any of those grand ideals. It smelled like old paper, burnt, boiled coffee, and the kind of floor wax that's meant to cover up the scent of stale air and desperation. It was a bureaucratic smell. The smell of things ending, not with a bang, but with a staple through a stack of forms. I sat on a hard wooden bench that had been polished smooth by 1,000 other people's anxieties. My tie, one I hadn't worn in years, felt like a polite noose around my neck. I'd knotted it too tight in the dark of my closet this morning. But my hands, resting on my knees, were steady. That was the one thing I promised myself. I wouldn't tremble. I wasn't here to beg or fight or even negotiate. I was just here to close the account. And then they arrived. It was like a slow-motion scene from a movie I'd been forced to watch for the last decade. Madison first. Of course. She didn't just walk in. She made an entrance. She lounged onto the bench across the aisle like she was on a magazine cover shoot, legs crossed so high it looked strategic. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, a move so arrogant, so Madison, that I almost had to respect the sheer audacity of it. She was chewing gum, popping it slowly, rhythmically, like the outcome of the entire day was already decided, and she was just here for the catering. But the real show, the main event, was 2 seats down from her parents, Marjorie and Wallace Whitmore, the kind of people who donated to libraries, not because they love books, but because they love having their names etched in bronze on the patron's wall. The kind of people who believe their money didn't just buy things. It bought facts. It bought righteousness. Wallace, thick in the middle and smelling faintly of expensive aftershave, caught my eye. He didn't nod. He just grunted and turned away, as if he'd smelled something rotten. He'd never liked me. I was the help, the guy with dirt under his fingernails who'd somehow tricked his princess. He didn't care that I was the one who came over with my tools to fix their perpetually broken sprinkler system, or the one who rewired their guest house for free. To him, I was just the guy who wasn't one of them. Marjorie, on the other hand, was a different kind of predator, dressed in a beige suit that probably cost more than my truck. She looked like she was heading to a country club brunch, not her daughter's divorce. She sniffed an audible, practiced sound of disdain. "You've always lived beyond your station, Daniel," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet hall, intended for me and everyone else to hear. "That's always been the problem. You thought marrying Madison, well, you thought it made you somebody." I felt the eyes of the other people on the benches, the other sad stories, turn to us. This was a performance she wanted. I turned my head, just slightly. I didn't raise my voice. "I never wanted to be somebody, Marjorie," I said, my voice flat. "I just wanted to be her husband." I paused, letting the words hang in the stale air. "Turns out that job, it was above your daughter's pay grade." Her mouth twitched, a tiny, almost imperceptible spasm of rage. She didn't reply, not verbally. She just turned to Madison and gave that cold little nod. The kind of nod a queen gives her champion, a silent command for blood. But the only one not looking at me, the only one not part of the performance, was Grace, Madison's younger sister. I'd almost forgotten she'd be here. She sat tucked into the far corner of the Whitmore bench, hands folded neatly in her lap, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. She wore a soft, pale blue cardigan, the kind with little pearl buttons, and had her hair pinned back in a way that seemed functional, not fashionable. She was the family's afterthought, the quiet one, the one who didn't want to be noticed. But as I looked over, her eyes flicked up and met mine for just a second, just one single, stolen second. And in that instant, I caught something I hadn't expected. Not pity, not anger, not the family-branded contempt. Guilt. It was so raw, so out of place, that it almost knocked me off balance. Then, just as quickly, she looked down at her folded hands, disappearing again. The bailiff called us in. Hunt versus Whitmore Hunt. The hearing itself was a blur. It was quicker, more sterile than I thought it would be. Madison's lawyer, a guy who looked like he ironed his face every morning, got up and tried to paint me as controlling, bitter, and manipulative. He used words like financially abusive to describe the fact that I put a limit on her credit card after she'd maxed out 3 of them on business expenses that turned out to be a weekend in Miami with her friends. Madison didn't say much. She didn't need to. She let the expensive suit do the talking while she sat there, legs crossed, arms folded, checking her manicure like she was waiting for her latte to arrive. When it was my lawyer's turn, he didn't make a speech. He just stood up and handed over a file. Bank statements, mortgage records, all in my name, from before the marriage. Receipts of materials I'd bought to build the deck, the invoices I'd paid for the new roof, the loan documents for her car, the one I co-signed for and had been paying off. It wasn't an attack. It was just arithmetic. It was quiet when the judge, a woman with tired eyes and glasses perched low on her nose, leaned forward and looked over the rims. "It appears," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone, "that Mr. Hunt should retain ownership of the property and all assets registered solely in his name prior to and during the marriage." She looked at Madison. "Mrs. Whitmore Hunt will receive monetary compensation for her documented contributions to the household and will retain ownership of her vehicle." She looked back at the file. "Divorce finalizes today." Just like that. A gavel that wasn't. A pen stroke. An empire of 2 dissolved. Madison didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. But I saw it. I saw the muscles in her jaw tighten. Just once. The performance had cracked. Outside, the sky had turned that flat, oppressive Texan gray. The kind that promises a thunderstorm but delivers only a heavy, humid sweat. As we stepped out of the courthouse and onto the wide, concrete stairs, Wallace blocked my path. He leaned in, his aftershave suddenly suffocating. "This isn't over," he said, his voice a low growl, meant just for my ear. "You humiliated my daughter in there." I didn't lean away. I didn't posture. I just stepped past him, down 1 step. "No, Wallace." I replied, not even looking back. She did that to herself. Years ago. Grace passed by quietly, her head down, following her family like a well-behaved ghost. But before she got to the bottom step, before she followed them to the waiting Mercedes, she looked back, just a flick of her eyes, over her shoulder. Then she was gone. I stood there for a moment. I was still wearing the same scuffed, brown leather boots I'd worn when I built the deck out back. The same boots Madison once told me were embarrassing and blue-collar. Funny, I looked down at them. Those boots had lasted longer than our marriage. As I sat behind the wheel of my old truck, the one I bought after selling the other one for her, I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. It felt like I'd been underwater for a decade. This wasn't a victory. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. Not yet, but it was a start. They came to watch me squirm. They came to see me crushed under the weight of their name, their money, their expectations. What they saw instead was a man who'd already buried the marriage and just needed the death certificate. And maybe, just maybe, one of them saw the truth. Not Madison, not her parents, but Grace. The courthouse steps weren't even a memory before I heard her voice, sharp as a stiletto on concrete. Unbelievable. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking toward my truck, the old Ford that sat waiting patiently at the curb like a loyal dog. I was 20 yards away, my hand already reaching for the keys in my pocket, when I heard her heels clicking fast against the pavement, a frantic, angry sound. Daniel, you really think this is fair? She caught up quick, just as I reached the driver's side door. Her manicured hand, the one that still wore the ring I bought, reached for my arm, yanking hard. Her nails dug in, even through the fabric of my suit jacket. Don't you dare walk away from me. You owe me more than this. I stopped. I finally turned, facing her fully in the flat, gray sky. She looked different out here, without the courtroom's suffocating calm. Her lipstick, a shade of defiant red, was slightly smudged. Her expensive hair was windblown, and a mask of pure, unadulterated fury was written all over her face, like she'd carved it there herself. The performance was over. This was a raw nerve. Oh, you, I repeated. The word tasted strange, like ash. I gently but firmly detached her hand from my arm. I gave you everything I had, Madison. My time, my work, my name, my money. I gave you the best years of my life. And when all that wasn't enough, you went looking for more. In clubs, in those networking events, in people who didn't ask you too many questions. She scoffed, a sound of pure disgust. Oh, please, this pathetic victim act. You really think anyone buys it? You've been moping around that house for years, sucking the life out of every room. You're boring, Daniel. You're a black hole of boring. No, act, I said, my voice quiet. It was this quietness that enraged her the most. It always had. Just facts. The judge saw them. I saw them. Even your sister saw them. The mention of Grace made her flinch, a tiny, almost invisible recoil. But she recovered instantly. You think you've won? She laughed, but the sound was brittle now, cracking at the edges. You think keeping that sad, empty little house means you came out on top? You'll die alone in it, Daniel. You'll die alone, fixing a leaky faucet, and no one will even know. She leaned in, her perfume a suffocating cloud. You're not the catch you think you are. You were my project, and I'm done with it. There it was, the final, desperate shot, aimed right where she thought my heart used to be. I looked at her, really looked at her. The anger that had been a low-burning coal in my chest for years finally just went out. It wasn't anger I felt. It was pity. Maybe not, I said, unlocking the truck door. The click of the latch was loud in the sudden silence. But at least I know who I am. And at least, I said, pulling the door open and looking her square in the eye, I'm not still out here performing. I'm not the star of a reality show that got canceled 2 seasons ago, still screaming at the cameras, begging them to turn back on. That one hit. That one landed. Madison's face flushed a deep, mottled red. Her mouth opened, then closed, twitching like she wanted to say something crueler, something that would draw blood, but the words wouldn't come. She was an actress without a script. Instead, she just spun on her heel, a movement so violent she almost stumbled, and stormed toward her parents' waiting Mercedes. The sharp slam of the car door punctuated her exit, like a gavel. Final. Done. I climbed into my truck and sat still for a long minute. Just sat, hands resting on the steering wheel, the cracked leather familiar under my palms. The sun, weak as it was, filtered through the dusty windshield. I watched their car pull away. Marjorie, white-knuckled on the wheel. Wallace, staring daggers through the glass, his face a thundercloud. And Grace, in the back seat, staring at the headrest in front of her, like it held all the answers she was too afraid to look for. When the road was clear, when they were just a silver speck disappearing toward the highway, I finally started the engine. The old V8 rumbled to life, a low, reassuring sound. And for the first time in I don't know how many months, I turned the radio on. I turned the music up. Not too loud, just enough to fill the silence that, for so long, had used to suffocate me. It was almost dusk by the time I got home. The drive had been long. I'd taken the back roads, the ones that wind through fields and past old barns. I needed the space. I needed the miles. The house stood there exactly as I'd left it this morning. Same faded green shutters. Same porch swing that creaked when the wind passed through. But it felt different. It was mine. I walked in, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like her perfume. It didn't smell like the expensive, waxy candles she was always burning. It just smelled like a house, like wood and dust motes in the setting sun and the faint, good smell of old books. No more passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge. No more clouds of floral spray trying to cover the scent of stale wine. No more muffled, late-night phone calls I was supposed to pretend I couldn't hear, filtering from behind a locked bathroom door. Just peace. I went through the house, room by room, and I opened the windows. I opened every single one wide, letting the cool evening air roll through. It felt like an exorcism, carrying out the old arguments, the quiet, bitter crying, the thick, heavy fog of me constantly second-guessing myself. I walked through each room like I was reintroducing myself to a version of me I hadn't seen in years. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It didn't accuse me. It didn't ask me for explanations. It just welcomed me home. I made a simple dinner. The kind of dinner she always scoffed at. Grilled cheese on thick-cut bread, a can of tomato soup, and a cold beer from the back of the fridge. I didn't eat it at the dining room table we bought, but never used. I ate on the porch, with my boots kicked up on the railing, watching the sun bleed a fiery orange and purple behind the trees. And somewhere between the last bite of the sandwich and the first chirp of the evening crickets, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just tired, but it was a clean tired. The kind of tired that comes after a long day of hard, physical labor. The kind that comes after finishing something that took more strength than you even knew you had. That night, I lay in bed with the windows cracked open. The soft hum of the street, the distant bark of a dog. It was like a lullaby. No yelling. No door slamming. No cold, empty space beside me that was somehow more exhausting than being alone. I slept better than I had in months. Deeper. And when I woke the next morning, sunlight was creeping over the ceiling, painting the room in a warm, gentle light. I didn't check my phone for texts that weren't coming. I didn't brace myself for the day. I just lay there, and I breathed. 2 whole days passed. They passed in a blur of quiet, deliberate routines. The thing about silence, when you've lived in chaos for so long, is that it's not empty. It's full. It's full of all the things you couldn't hear before. I could hear the house settling. I could hear the click of the mail slot when the postman came. I could hear my own breathing. On the first day, I mowed the lawn, not because it was long, but because I wanted the smell of cut grass. I wanted the satisfying, straightforward rumble of the engine. I wanted to see the clean, straight lines I'd left behind. It was proof of work. Simple, honest. On the second day, I cleaned the gutters. I climbed a ladder, my hands getting scratched by twigs and old, packed-in leaves. It was messy, thankless work. The kind of work Madison would have paid someone else to do, and then complain about the bill. But as I scooped out the last handful of damp debris, I felt that clean, simple satisfaction again. The water would flow right next time it rained. Then I tackled the cabinet. It was a small thing, a stupid small thing. The cabinet door under the kitchen sink had been hanging by one hinge for 6 months. Every time I opened it to get the trash bags, it would groan and sag, and I'd have to lift it and slam it just to get it to close. I'd told myself I'd fix it 100 times, but there was always some other fire to put out. Madison's car breaking down. Madison's boutique running in the red. Madison, but now there were no fires. I went to the garage, found my old wooden toolbox. I found the right screwdriver, a couple with screws, and a sliver of wood for a shim. It took me 10 minutes. 10 minutes of focused, quiet work. I drilled a new pilot hole. I set the hinge. I tightened the screws. And I swung the door. It closed, perfectly, with a soft, satisfying thunk. I opened it. I closed it again. Thunk. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, a ridiculous, small smile on my face. There's something about reclaiming your space that isn't just about the big gestures. It's not just about the name on the deed. It's about fixing the hinge. It's about the mowed lawn. It's about telling the world and yourself that you are in control of this small patch of ground. You are restoring order. I was in the living room, reading a book I'd started 3 years ago, when the doorbell rang. It was a warm Thursday afternoon, the kind of lazy, sun-drenched day where the world is at work and the neighborhood is asleep. The sound was so sudden, so alien to my newfound peace, that I actually flinched. My heart hammered. My first thought, Madison. She'd forgotten a shoe. She decided she wanted the blender. She was back for round 2. My second thought, Wallace, coming to deliver on his threat, maybe with a lawyer this time, or just to try and stare me down on my own property. I walked to the door slowly. I looked through the peephole, and I froze. It wasn't Madison. It wasn't Wallace. It was Grace. She looked impossibly small, standing on my porch. She seemed to shrink under the big Texas sky. She was wearing a pale green cardigan, the color of new leaves, and the sleeves were tugged down so far they completely covered her hands. She was just standing there, not like she was waiting to be let in, but like she was waiting for the courage to run away. She kept darting her eyes from the porch railing to the street and then back to my door, as if she was terrified of who might see her. I opened the door. She jumped, her eyes flying to mine, wide and panicked. She looked like a fawn that had wandered onto a highway. Grace, I know this is weird, she said. Her voice was so soft I could barely hear it. I'm so sorry to bother you. I didn't know who else to talk to. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob, my mind racing. Was this a trick? A Trojan horse? Was Madison in the car at the curb, waiting to charge in? But looking at her, at the genuine, trembling fear in her eyes, no. This wasn't performance. This was just Grace. I stepped aside. You want to come in? She hesitated, her eyes flicking back to the street one last time. Then, with a small, jerky nod, she slipped past me, careful not to brush against me, as if she was afraid she might break something. I led her into the living room, the same room where I'd sat in the dark, watching the TV flicker just a few nights ago. She didn't sit. She just stood there by the window, near the armchair, wrapping her arms tight over her chest, that self-protective pose, holding herself together. The silence in the room was heavy, awkward. I didn't know what to offer her. Coffee? A lawsuit? I overheard a lot, she said finally, her voice aimed at the window, not at me. During the whole mess, for months. She took a shaky breath. Stuff Madison said to her friends. Stuff she said to Mom and Dad. I waited. I let her speak at her own pace. I wasn't going to pull it out of her. She lied. Grace finally whispered. The word hung in the air. About everything. About why you were divorcing. About what you did. She turned to look at me, her eyes glistening. She made you sound like a monster. She told everyone you were controlling, that you were angry, that you were trapping her. And I just sat there. In the courthouse, I sat there. My voice was quiet. Why didn't you say anything? She flinched, like she expected me to yell. Because I was scared, she said, so fast the words tumbled over each other. You don't know what she's like. Madison, she controls everything in our family. The money, the mood, who's in, who's out. She always has. Speaking up, it would have made me the enemy. And I wasn't strong enough for that. The room fell into silence again, broken only by the steady tick-tick-tick of the wall clock. I didn't come here for forgiveness, she said, rubbing her arms, though the room wasn't cold. I thought you should know. You're not crazy. Her voice cracked. You didn't imagine it. You're not the monster. I nodded slowly, processing her words. The validation felt strange. It was a relief. Not exactly. I already knew I wasn't crazy, I said softly, but it's still good to hear. Grace gave a weak, watery smile, but there was a world of sadness behind it. I should have said something sooner. In the court, something. I walked to the door, opened it gently. You're here now, Grace. That's what matters. She didn't move for a second. Then she walked to the door, stopping at the threshold, 1 foot on the porch, 1 foot still in my house. Daniel, she said, and her voice caught. You don't deserve what she did to you, what any of us did. I know. She nodded. eyes glistening, and then she stepped out onto the porch and paused. She looked like she was about to walk away, but then she turned back, her face crumpling. "I shouldn't have come," she whispered, the tears finally spilling. Her voice cracked. "I just wanted to stop feeling like a coward." I looked at her, really looked at her, not as Madison's sister, but as this terrified, brave person standing on my porch. "You're not a coward, Grace," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "You just grew up in the same storm I did. The only difference is I finally walked out of it." She gave a soft, broken laugh through her tears, a sound of surprise and pain all mixed together. She nodded, wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve-covered hand, and turned. She walked down the steps, not looking back this time. I watched her go, her silhouette shrinking against the bright, indifferent sun, until she turned the corner and was gone. For a moment, I felt something stir. Not anger, not sadness, just a faint, echoing sense of recognition, like two survivors passing each other on a high, narrow bridge, both too bruised a wave, but still silently, profoundly grateful the other one made it out. It was a gray Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sky can't decide between a full-on downpour or just sulking for a few hours. The air was heavy. I'd spent the morning tinkering in the garage, but the silence of the house, which had been a comfort, was starting to feel a little too empty. I was healing, I knew that, but I was also restless. I felt like a man who had just woken up from a long, debilitating fever, weak, unsure of my footing, but desperate to get out of the sick room. So I drove. No destination. I just ended up in the older part of town, the one with the brick-paved sidewalks and the independent shops. I found myself ducking into the local bookstore, the last page, mostly just to kill time and get out of the oppressive humidity. The place smelled exactly as a bookstore should, like old paper, dust, and a hint of almond from a coffee bar in the back. The floors creaked under every step. A low, humming jazz trumpet was playing from a speaker tucked behind a plant that had seen better days. It was the complete opposite of the life I'd been living. It was quiet, but it was a living quiet, full of stories, not anxieties. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just browsing, letting my fingers trail over the spines of books, reading titles, feeling the simple, tactile pleasure of it. I was halfway down the nonfiction aisle, flipping through a thick biography of some general I'd never actually buy, when I heard a familiar, soft voice. "Daniel." I turned, and there she was, Grace. She looked completely different than she had on my porch, and completely different from the courthouse. She was holding a small, neat stack of books against her chest, her sweater sleeves pulled down over her hands again, like armor. But she wasn't crying, and she wasn't terrified. Her eyes were wide, yes, but more in surprise than in fear. I raised a brow, a small smile playing on my lips before I could stop it. "Are you following me, Grace?" A small, startled laugh escaped her. It was a bright, unexpected sound. "Maybe," she said, shaking her head, "but you're not that interesting." "Good to know," I said, leaning against a bookshelf. "Though I have to say, running into you twice in 1 week, right after not seeing you for, well, years, feels a little suspicious." "I work down the street," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the front window, "at the admin office. I come here on my lunch break sometimes, or just to get away." She looked around. "It's quiet." "Yeah," I said, looking around with her. "That's rare these days." There was a pause. Not the heavy, awkward silence we'd shared on my porch, but a softer, more uncertain one. Grace glanced down at the top book in her stack. I read the title, Women Who Run with the Wolves. She saw me reading it, and her cheeks flushed a faint, pretty pink. "Don't judge me," she said with a small, sheepish smile. I held up my hands in mock surrender. I'd be a hypocrite. I'd be about to start the same Cormac McCarthy novel for 3 years. It's currently a very affected coaster. That made her laugh. A real laugh this time, not the startled, half-broken one. It was nice. It was light. And in that moment, something loosened between us. The Madison of it all, the heavy, dark thing that connected us, just receded. We were just two people, standing in a bookstore on a gray Saturday. We started to talk. Not about anything important. About the weather. About the terrible jazz. About how she used to be the kid who would fake a stomach ache just to stay home and read. Madison hated that, she said, a shadow passing over her face as she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She used to tease me about it all the time. Told my parents I was antisocial. She looked out the front window at the street. She said I'd grow up to be invisible. I didn't say anything right away. I just watched her eyes as she looked at her reflection in the glass. She never liked things she couldn't control. I said, finally, my voice quiet. Grace nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on the window. She always took up the whole room. All the air, all the space. I learned to fold into the corners, to make myself small. And now, I asked. She looked at me, her eyes clear and incredibly sad, but also steady. Now, she whispered, I'm trying to remember how to unfold. I let those words sit there. I let them echo in the quiet aisle. I used to think I was the boring one. I admitted, the confession surprised me as it came out. While Madison, sparkled, that's what everyone said. My own family. They said I was lucky to have her, lucky she chose me. Grace turned to face me fully. Her expression was intense. They didn't know her, she said, her voice fierce in its quiet. No, I replied, but I did, and I still stayed. Grace looked at me, and I felt like she was reading every line in my face, every year of compromise I'd made. You loved her, she said softly. That's not weakness, Daniel. That's just a bad investment. I didn't answer. I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. The rain finally started. A soft, gentle tapping against the high windows of the bookstore. We both stood there, watching it, saying nothing. It wasn't awkward. It was a kind of silence that fills a space without making it feel empty. It was the sound of two people understanding each other wordlessly. We stood to leave, the spell broken by the barista in the back, clanging a metal cup. She hesitated at the door, pulling her cardigan tighter. Thanks, she said, looking up at me through her lashes, for, letting me sit with you, metaphorically. You make it sound like I did you a favor. She smiled, that same soft, uncertain smile I'd seen on my porch. But it was different now, less haunted. It felt like one, she said. She pushed the door open, the little bell above it ringing. And just before she walked out into the rain, she looked back, that glance over her shoulder. It lingered, just a second too long to be casual, just long enough to feel like a question I didn't have the answer to. I watched her walk away, and I realized I wasn't just fixing a house. I was fixing a life, and I had a feeling I just found a piece I didn't even know was missing. The rest of the weekend was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. The bookstore silence had followed me home. Before, the silence in the house had been about an absence, the absence of Madison, of her noise, of the fighting. Now, the silence felt anticipatory. It felt like it was waiting for something, like I was waiting. I found myself thinking about that last look from Grace, that moment of connection that was as fragile and unexpected as a wildflower pushing up through a concrete sidewalk. I was in the backyard, trying to fix the hinge on the back gate. It was another one of those small, broken things I'd ignored for too long. The wood was warped. The screws were stripped. I was on my knees, wrestling with it, covered in sweat and grease, when my phone buzzed in the back pocket of my jeans. I ignored it. It buzzed again. A text. I sighed, frustrated, wiping my hands on a rag. I pulled it out, squinting in the bright Texas sun. A simple message. From a number I didn't have saved, but I knew exactly who it was. Grace, can we talk? I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. Before I could even think of what to write back, a new message popped up. Grace, now? I'm outside your house. My blood went cold. This was different from her turning up on my porch that first time, full of shame and tears. This was urgent. I stood up too fast, my knees cracking. I walked quickly through the house, my heart doing a stupid, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. What now? Had Madison done something? Had her parents? I walked to the front door, not even bothered with the peephole this time, and pulled it open. There she was. Again. But this Grace was not the terrified fawn from the first visit, nor the shy, bookish woman from the store. She was standing on the porch with her hands jammed into the pockets of a denim jacket that was 2 sizes too big. But her shoulders were set. She was pale, yes, and her eyes were huge, but she wasn't shrinking. She looked like someone bracing for a storm, but who had finally decided to stop running and just face the wind. You okay? I asked, my voice rough. She looked up, and her eyes were clear and steady. I am now, she said. It wasn't an answer to my question. It was a statement. I stepped aside. She didn't hesitate this time. She walked right in. I followed her into the kitchen. The afternoon sun was streaming in, catching the dust motes. Coffee? I asked out of habit. No, she said. Her voice was tight. I don't. I just need you to see this. She pulled out her phone, set it gently on the kitchen table, and looked me square in the eye. I want to help you, she said. Help me? I raised an eyebrow. With what? The gate? With her. She unlocked her phone, her fingers moving quickly, almost angrily. She scrolled, then turned the screen toward me. It was a screenshot, one of Madison's social media posts, from 2 weeks before the divorce. A friends-only post. A selfie of her, looking pouty and beautiful at some bar. The caption read, "Some men just don't deserve your loyalty. Know your worth, girls. Don't ever let anyone waste your shine." I blinked. That's not new, Grace. That's just Madison. Keep scrolling, she said. She swiped. More screenshots. Direct messages between Madison and her friends. Snarky, vicious comments about me, about my dead energy, laughing about how she was prepping her exit. Memes about upgrading. Group chat banner. One message from Madison, timestamp from a month ago, when he pays all the bills and you pay him back by living your best life. Hashtag upgrade, hashtag. He has no idea. My stomach turned over. A cold, sick feeling of recognition. It was one thing to know you were being gaslit. It was another thing entirely to see the receipts, to see the casual cruelty of it, all written down, celebrated, laughed at. You kept these? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grace nodded, her face grim. I saw them as they came in. She was always logged into her account on the family tablet. She'd forget. She's careless. She looked down. I never liked them. I just screenshotted them. I don't know why. I think. Her voice faltered. I think maybe I was waiting for the day when anyone, would finally care what the truth actually looked like. She took a deep, shuddering breath. But that's not all. She opened a different folder on her phone. My stomach, which was already in knots, clenched. Dozens of images, text threads, photos of Madison at clubs, at late-night dinners I was never invited to, photos with different guys, different nights, all of them time-stamped. She was seeing people, Daniel, Grace said, her voice flat, all emotion drained from it, long before the separation. Long before she ever said she was unhappy. She didn't leave because she was trapped. She left because she'd already found a replacement. She just wanted to make sure she could secure her brand as the victim first. She lied to everyone, Grace continued, her voice hardening. She told Mom and Dad you were the jealous one, that you were controlling, that you wouldn't let her breathe, and they believed her. And you saved this, I said. It wasn't a question. I didn't know what to do with it, she said, her eyes flashing with sudden hot anger. I felt sick, but then you were free. You were out, and I saw you in the bookstore, and you seemed, okay. I didn't want to drag you back in. I didn't want to be the one to break you. I'm not broken, Grace. I know, she said, and that's why I'm here now. She locked the phone and slid it across the table. Now, I want to do something. I leaned back, folded my arms over my chest. The quiet kitchen felt like a war room. What exactly are you suggesting, Grace? She met my eyes, and the woman from the bookstore was gone. This was someone new. I'm suggesting, she said, her voice low and even, we start putting the truth out there. Not revenge, not slander. Just facts, just the truth. You deserve your name back, Daniel. I studied her, the girl who used to hide behind her sister's shadow, the one who learned to fold into the corners, was now here in my kitchen, asking to stand in the very center of the fire. You're sure you want to get in the middle of this? I asked, my voice gentle. Your family, your parents, they won't take this well. She gave a soft, tired, almost bitter smile. They never really took me at all, Daniel. I was just a piece of scenery, a backdrop for Madison's life. She took a deep breath. I think I'm done waiting for them to start. There was a long silence. Not heavy, just full of meaning, full of consequence. I looked down at the dark, silent phone on my table. It was a bomb, a quiet digital bomb, holding all the evidence of months, maybe years of manipulation, all sitting there like a live wire. I pushed off the counter, walked over, and picked up the phone. I looked at the black screen, then at her. Okay, I said. Grace blinked. Really? Just, okay? I nodded. You've already done the hard part, Grace. You stood up. The least I can do is meet you halfway. A smile broke across her face. A real one. Wide and full of light that was equal parts relief and terror. That night, we sat side by side on my couch. Not talking. Just working. She'd airdropped the files to my laptop. We didn't create a new account. We didn't hide. We just posted. Not on my page. On a new one. A simple, anonymous blog page. We uploaded the screenshots. The DMs. The time-stamped photos. No captions. No accusations. No angry commentary. Just the truth. Clean, quiet, and brutal. The reactions, when we linked it to a new public social media account, came fast. Friends of hers. Friends of mine. People who had been on the periphery. Some with apologies. Some in disbelief. A few, the braver ones, even called Madison out directly, tagging her in posts, demanding an answer. By midnight, it was like a small digital tide had shifted. Not a flood, but a change. A correction. When Grace finally stood to leave, hours later, the exhaustion was plain on her face. But it was a good tired. The same kind I'd felt on my porch. She paused by the door, just like she had that first time. "I didn't think you'd say yes," she whispered. I looked at her, and for the first time, I wasn't seeing Madison's sister. I wasn't seeing a victim. I wasn't seeing anything but her. Just Grace. "You came to me with honesty, Grace." I said, "That's more than I've gotten from anyone in a long time." She nodded, a small, private smile just for me. She lingered a moment longer, then stepped out into the night. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my phone still buzzing in my pocket. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. And it had only just begun. The post sat online for 24 hours, sizzling. It was a quiet detonation. My phone, which had been silent for so long, had started to buzz, not with anger, but with a slow, hesitant trickle of apologies. Old friends, co-workers I hadn't spoken to. "Hey, man, I had no idea." "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I just listened to the gossip." Wow. Just wow. I didn't respond to most of them. I just read them. A quiet, bitter vindication settling in my chest. I was in the kitchen, making a cup of coffee I didn't really want, just for something to do with my hands. The house was too quiet. The storm had broken, and I was just standing in the eerie, electric blue calm after the lightning strike. That's when my phone rang. Not a text. A call. It was Grace. I answered it, my thumb fumbling. "Grace? You okay?" Her voice was shaky, but terrifyingly calm. It was that eerie, preternatural mix of someone who has just walked away from a car crash. The shock is so profound, the adrenaline's so high, that the screaming hasn't started yet. "I told her," Grace said. No hello, no preamble. Just those 3 words. I sat down at the kitchen table. "Told who?" "What?" "Madison," she whispered. I told her it was me. I told her I was done covering for her. That I helped you. That I had the screenshots. That I was the one who turned on the lights. My gut clenched. A cold, hard knot of fear. Not for me, but for her. "Grace, are you safe?" A sound that was half a laugh, half a sob, came through the phone. It was humorless and brittle. "Safe? I don't even know what that means anymore." She took a long, shuddering breath, and then the words came, tumbling out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them in for a lifetime. She convened a family meeting. That's what she called it. She found the blog. She saw the tags. She drove to my apartment at 6 this morning, banged on the door until I opened it, and she just screamed. I could hear her in my mind. Madison at full theatrical volume. She screamed so loud. "Daniel, I think the walls shook." She said I'd ruined the family, that I was a traitor, that I was jealous of her. Grace's voice cracked on that word, the old wound breaking open. She said I was jealous, and that I was trying to steal her spotlight. "And your parents?" I asked, my voice low. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a full 10 seconds. When Grace spoke again, her voice was hollow. They stood behind her. Like always. Mom didn't even look at the screenshots I tried to show her. She just said I was fanning the flames and being dramatic. "And Dad, he told me that you had manipulated me, that you had poisoned me against my own family, that I was destroying the Whitmore name." I closed my eyes. The cowardice of it, the willful blindness. She told me I was dead to her, Daniel, Grace whispered, and the fake calm finally broke. I heard a muffled sob. She said if I ever show my face at Thanksgiving, she'd throw the turkey at my head. Despite the weight of it all, a soft, dark exhale that was somewhere between a sigh and a laugh escaped me. Well, I said, my voice rough. Guess that saved you a bad meal. She was quiet for a moment. Then a small, watery sniffle that might have been a laugh. Yeah, I guess so. I'm scared, she whispered, all pretense gone. She meant it. I'm out. I'm really finally out. Those two words, I'm scared, cut deeper than all the insults Madison had ever thrown at me, because I knew that fear. It was the fear of the open ocean, after you finally let go of the sinking ship. I sat up, leaning forward, my elbows on the table, gripping the phone. You didn't do anything wrong, Grace, I said, and I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. I know that, she said, her voice small. But knowing it doesn't make it easier. Not right now. I looked out the kitchen window at my yard. The yard I'd mowed. The wind was picking up. Leaves were scattering across the lawn, messy, loud, and impossible control. I'm sorry I dragged you into this, I said, and I was surprised to find I meant it. You didn't drag me, she replied instantly, her voice fierce for a second. I walked in. I had to. Another pause. Then she whispered a question, so quiet I could barely hear it. Was it worth it, Daniel? For you? All of this, the fighting, the court, was it worth it? Being free. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the silent house, the good coffee, the fixed hinge, the sound of my own breathing. It's the only thing that is, I said. She let that settle. I just needed to hear someone say it, she admitted. You're not alone anymore, Grace. I told her, and I meant it. I meant it more than anything I'd said in a long, long time. After we hung up, I sat at the table for an hour, the cooling coffee forgotten. I stared at the wood grain. I thought about the way of her choice, the cost of it, what it must have taken for someone like Grace, quiet, loyal, invisible most of her life, to finally speak. She didn't just do it to save me. I knew that now. She did it to stop disappearing. And maybe, just maybe, that made her the strongest one of us all. It was just after midnight. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I was sitting in the living room, in the dark, in that same armchair. But it wasn't my post-Madison vigil anymore. I was just reading a book, the small cone of light from the lamp isolating me in the quiet. Peace. My phone buzzed on the side table. A text. Grace, I need to show you something. Can I come over? My heart would have been beating at a slow, resting pace, gave a hard kick. This was different from her last "Can we talk?" This was late. This was ominous. I thought about her voice on the phone earlier, the raw-edged fear. My thumbs moved before my brain fully caught up. Me, doors open. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and turned on the small light over the sink. I didn't make coffee. I just waited, leaning against the counter. 5 minutes later, I heard her car pull up, the sound of the engine cutting off abruptly. She didn't knock. I heard the front door open, a soft click, and then her footsteps on the hardwood. She'd done 100 times before, I thought, and the idea was strangely comforting. She appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked different. Again, this wasn't the terrified fawn, the shy book lover, or the shaken victim of her family's rage. This Grace was tense, tired, and her eyes were shining with a kind of cold, hard resolve. She was done running. She didn't sit. She just walked to the kitchen table, took out her phone, and handed it to me. The screen was already unlocked. I found this, she said, her voice low and flat. She forgot to log out of her backup email account on the family tablet, the one she used to talk to the guys she was cheating with, the one she wasn't just flirting with. I looked at her, then down at the phone. Grace, I saw the pictures, the DMs. I know she... No, she interrupted, and her voice was sharp. You don't. You saw the social part, the bragging, the performance. Her hand was shaking, just slightly. This is a logistics. I scrolled. My stomach, which I thought had nothing left to react with, simply bottomed out. It wasn't just DMs. It was email threads. Long, detailed, sickening. Conversations with one man in particular. A man from Austin. A developer. Older with money. It was planning. Timestamps from 6 months ago. Discussing the best way to break it to Daniel. to maximize her exit. Discussions of what assets she thought she could realistically get. A long, detailed lie she constructed about me having a drinking problem that she was planning to use if I fought her on the house. Photos, not club photos. Intimate photos. The kind you don't take for social media. The kind you don't take unless you've already given everything away. Dates and times that ran back months, well before she ever started a single fight, well before I ever felt the chill. Days she told me she was at a niche trade show. Days she told me she was at her mother's. It was all there, not the story of a marriage that failed. The story of a long, cold, calculated con. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled until I couldn't breathe. I finally looked up at Grace. Her eyes were glassy, brimming with unshed tears. I should have told you sooner, she whispered, her voice cracking. I found these before the divorce was final. I had these when I came to you on the porch that first day. I had them in the bookstore. I just stared at her, my mind a blank, white static. But you were finally doing better, she choked out. You were smiling in the bookstore. You were okay. And I didn't want to set you back. I didn't want to be the reason you unraveled again. I thought the blog was enough. Just enough to clear your name. I thought, maybe you never had to see this. Maybe you could just heal. I held the phone, the screen dark now, the reflection showing a man I didn't recognize. I breathed, slowly, in, out. You were trying to protect me, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she sobbed, the tears finally spilling, even if it wasn't my place. I didn't want to hurt you more. I put her phone down on the table, a gentle click on the wood. I shook my head. No, Grace. She looked up, her face a mess of confusion and guilt. You weren't right to wait, I said, my voice quiet, but hard as steel. But you're also right to show me now. She sank into the chair across from me, the one I used to sit in, and folded her arms tightly, as if she was freezing. I'm so scared what comes next, she said. She's threatening to make everything worse. She's unhinged, and after today, I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep standing in the crossfire. I looked at her, this woman who had carried this poison, this truth, alone for months, trying to shield a man she barely knew, all while being torn apart by her own family. I set the phone down, and I leaned forward, my hands on the table. You are, I said. Grace looked at me, searching my face for something. You're not the same woman who showed up on my porch, I said, my voice low. You're not the girl who's afraid of her own voice. You've been braver in 2 weeks than most people manage in a lifetime. You've been braver than I was for 10 years. She blinked, tears spilling, quiet and unchecked. I just didn't want to carry it anymore. It was so heavy. You're not, I said, not alone. She stayed a while longer. We didn't talk much after that. Sometimes you don't need more words. You just need someone to sit in the rubble with you, to share the weight of it. When she finally stood to leave, I walked her to the door. She hesitated at the threshold, just like she always did. But this time, she was looking at me, not at the street. You're not angry? She asked, her voice small. I shook my head. No, not at you. Her lip quivered, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide it. She didn't wipe the tears away. Good night, Daniel. Night, Grace. I watched her walk down the path and disappear into the dark, and when I closed the door, I locked it. I leaned against the solid wood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about vindication. It was about the fact that Madison hadn't just left a marriage. She had stolen a life, and Grace had just handed me the proof. The morning came heavy, not with light, but with a thick, gray humidity that matched the weight in my chest. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the hours from 2 a.m. until sunrise in the armchair, the lamp off, just staring into the shadows. I was processing the emails, the logistics. It wasn't the cheating that hollowed me out. I'd known, on some level, that had been happening for a long time. It was the coldness, the calculation, the conversations about my drinking problem, a fiction she'd invented, a niche narrative to be deployed, the casual way she discussed me, not as a husband, but as a problem to be managed, a financial obstacle to be overcome. She hadn't been a wife. She had been a saboteur living in my house, and I had been paying her for the privilege. I was halfway through making coffee, the rich, dark smell doing nothing to cut through the bitter taste in my mouth, when I heard it. It wasn't a knock. It was a slam. The front door handle jiggled violently, and then the door itself slammed open, banging against the wall with such force I thought the wood would split. Madison. But this wasn't the 3 a.m. drunk. This wasn't the smug courtroom performer. This was someone or something I'd never seen before. Her hair was wild, unwashed. Her eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red, but they were burning. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her face was pale and blotchy, like she hadn't slept in days. This was a cornered animal. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked, her voice a raw, broken sound. "You think destroying my life, turning my own family against me, is going to make you some kind of hero?" I didn't flinch. I just took a slow sip of coffee. "Morning to you, too, Madison." Don't you do that," she snarled, stalking into the kitchen, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "Don't you play your calm, boring, pathetic card with me. Not now. My brand deals are falling apart." She was practically sobbing now, but it was a rage sob, not a sad one. My parents, they're asking questions. Questions I shouldn't have to answer. You did this." I set the cup down and leaned against the counter. "No, I didn't," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I just stopped letting you lie. You did the rest." I paused. Or maybe I should ask, when exactly did you start lying to everyone around you? Why did you have to invent a drinking problem for me? Why did your sister have to be the one to finally tell the truth? Her head snapped up at the mention of her sister. The rage focused, becoming a laser. "Where is she?" "Who, Grace?" "Don't play dumb with me, Daniel," she shouted, her voice cracking. She's a reason. She's the reason all of this exploded. She was always jealous, always a little gray mouse in the corner. And she's the one who stole my screenshots, my life." "She didn't steal anything, Madison," I said calmly. "She revealed what you buried. There's a difference." Madison stormed toward me until she was inches from my face. I could smell the stale, sour scent of her rage. "She's dead to me. Do you hear me? Dead. I gave her everything. My clothes, my contacts, my guidance. I taught her how to be someone. And this is how she repays me." I almost laughed. "Your guidance broke her, Madison. You didn't raise her. You erased her. And she finally realized you weren't a lighthouse. You were the storm." The front door opened again, softly, before she could respond. "Grace." She stepped in slowly, her expression unreadable. She was in jeans, a hoodie, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Calm, collected, until her eyes met Madison's. "You don't belong here," Madison snapped, spinning on her. "This isn't your house anymore," Grace replied, her voice soft, but with a new, unbreakable core. "You gave that up when you walked out." Madison's eyes flared with new, hotter fire. "Oh, look, the mouse grew a spine. You think he's going to save you? You think you've won." She laughed, that high, brittle sound. "He won't. He's pathetic. He's a carpenter who thinks he's a king. He's always been pathetic." Grace didn't blink. "He doesn't have to save me, Madison. I saved myself." The silence that followed was sharp as a razor. Madison, for the first time in her life, was speechless. She had no script for this. She looked from me to Grace, her face twisting, trying to find the angle, the weapon. "You ruined everything," she whispered, her bravado finally crumbling. "Our family, our name, everything." "No," Grace interrupted, and her voice rose, not in a shriek, but in a proclamation. It was steady. It was strong. It filled the room. "You ruined everything, Madison. You lied. You cheated. You conned. You built your entire life on a foundation of sand, and you're just angry that someone finally opened a window. I just stopped cleaning up after you." I'd never seen Madison like this. Cornered, exposed, rattled beyond repair. She looked at both of us like she didn't recognize what we'd become, and it terrified her, because we weren't afraid anymore. "Leave," I said, my voice low. She hesitated, her bravado faltering, her eyes darting between us. "Now," I said. She stared at me, then at Grace. For one split second, her face cracked, not with rage, but with something older. Grief, desperation, a terrifying, hollow emptiness clawing its way to the surface. But then, like a switch, she turned it off. "Fine," she spat. She pulled her coat tighter, a useless, theatrical gesture of defiance. "Have him. Have this house. You deserve each other. The two most boring, self-righteous people on the planet." She stormed past us, and for a moment I thought that was it. But she stopped at the door, her back to us. "I may have lost," she said, her voice dripping with a new, colder venom. "But you didn't win. You'll never be happy, Daniel, because you'll always know you were my second choice. And you, Grace, you weren't even a choice." She slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. We stood in the quiet for a long, long time. The echo of the slam seemed to hang in the air. Grace spoke first, her voice a whisper. She's never going to let this go, is she?" "I know," I said. "But now, she doesn't get to rewrite the story." Grace looked up at me, her eyes clear, finally free of a storm. "She's going to turn our parents completely against me. Forever." "She already had," I said, "turned to face her. But that doesn't mean they'll stay blind forever. And it doesn't matter. You're free." She exhaled a long, shuddering breath that seemed to empty her of the last 10 years of fear. I didn't expect it to feel like this." "Like what?" She gave a soft, almost sad smile. "Like freedom and heartbreak, both at the same time." I nodded slowly. "That's how you know it was real." Grace moved toward the window, staring out at the empty street, as if to be sure Madison had truly gone, as if she might come charging back. "She's lost control," I said, coming to stand beside her, "and she's trying to break whatever she can on her way down." "She almost did," Grace whispered, her eyes fixed on the road. "She almost broke me. She almost broke you. But she didn't." We didn't say anything for a while. We just stood there, side by side in the morning light, breathing the same air. Two survivors, standing in the quiet wreckage. And then, quietly, so quietly I almost wasn't sure it happened, Grace reached out and took my hand. I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch. I just held it. It didn't feel like we were surviving something anymore. It felt like we were building something. Something she and no one else could ever touch. It was 2 days later when I got the email. 2 days of the house breathing. 2 days of quiet conversations with Grace. Not about the past, not about Madison, but about normal things. What she was reading, what I was planning to fix in the yard. It was a strange, delicate, and incredibly normal feeling, like learning to walk again after a long illness. The email's subject line, which popped up on my phone while I was washing my coffee mug, made my stomach tighten, an old, reflexive flinch. From Wallace and Marjorie Whitmore's subject, an acknowledgement. I stared at it for longer than I care to admit. There was a time when I would have deleted it without a second thought, assuming it was a legal threat or another salvo in Madison's war. But something in me, the same something that had stopped flinching when doors slammed, made me click it instead. It was short, stilted, formal, but it was unmistakably sincere, written in the pained, precise language of people who are not accustomed to being wrong. "Daniel, in light of recent information, which Grace felt compelled to share with us in its entirety, we have taken time to go through what was provided. We were unaware of the full extent of the situation. Madison, in her distress, never offered clarity, and regrettably, we never asked for it. We owe you an apology. What you did for our family, financially, emotionally, and otherwise, was never fully acknowledged. We are sorry for that. We were blinded by loyalty to our daughter, but that does not excuse the manner in which we treated you, both privately and in public. We hope this finds you well. Sincerely, Wallace and Marjorie Whitmore." I read it 3 times. It wasn't a victory. It didn't make me want to cheer. I hadn't done anything grand. I hadn't delivered speeches, or stormed their gates, or demanded justice. I had just stopped running. I had listened to Grace. I had stood by her when no one else would. I never asked for their approval. I never needed their validation. But I'd be lying if I said reading it didn't settle something deep inside me. It was like a long-held breath finally, fully released. It was the last ghost in the house, and it had just been shown the door. That night, Grace came over after work. She didn't text first. She just appeared. It was becoming a new routine. She had a bag of groceries in one hand. "I was thinking," she'd said, holding up a lemon, "that we could, I don't know, not have grilled cheese." I just smiled and taken the bag. We ate a simple dinner. Chicken and rice. We ate it at the kitchen table, the one that had seen the bomb of her phone on it just nights before. Now it was just a table. Later, we sat on the porch. The sun was beginning to set. The wind was starting to cool, carrying the first real, crisp scent of fall. The leaves on the big oak in the yard had just started to turn, painting the edges in soft gold and tired red. The kind of fall Texas offers when summer finally, reluctantly, releases its grip. Grace sat beside me on the porch swing, her knees curled up to her chest, sipping a mug of chamomile tea. I had my own, black coffee I didn't really need, but drank out of habit. We sat in silence for a while. Not the heavy, anxious silence of the past, but the easy, comfortable quiet of two people who didn't have anything left to prove. I got an email today. I said, my voice quiet, just for her. She tilted her head. From your parents. Her grip tightened just slightly on the warm mug. I could see her bracing, the old reflex to shrink, to expect a blow. They apologized. I continued, keeping my voice level. They said they were sorry. They said, thank you. They said they saw everything. The emails, the real ones. She blinked, visibly stunned. She looked away from me, out at the yard, at the changing leaves. Her lower lip trembled, just once. They never apologized, she whispered, her voice thick. Not for anything. Not ever. I know, I said. She was quiet for a long time. I watched her process it. That confusing, chaotic mix of disbelief and quiet. Profound grief. Because even when the truth is vindicated, it doesn't erase the years it was ignored. They never protected me, she said, her voice so soft it was almost carried away by the wind. Not once. Not when Madison bullied me or lied or stole things that mattered. They always said it was just sisters being sisters. And now they apologize to you. I reached out, my hand hesitant, and just rested on the back of the swing, near her shoulder. They're apologizing because they finally see the truth, Grace, I said gently. The truth you uncovered. The truth you had the courage to show them. This is your victory, not mine. She gave a bitter, watery chuckle. Too late, she whispered. Maybe, I said, but sometimes late is still something. We sat in silence for a while longer. The wind had picked up, and somewhere down the block, wind chimes danced, a high, clear, metallic sound. Grace looked over at me, her eyes clear in the fading light. You know, she said softly, I didn't just stand up for you. I know. I stood up for me. You deserve to, I said. She exhaled, the sound almost fragile, and it seemed to carry away the last of her tension. I feel like I've been holding my breath since I was 12 years old. Then breathe, I said, smiling a little. You've earned it. She looked at me for a long time, not like I was Madison's ex-husband, not like I was her family's drama, but like I was just Daniel, something steady, something safe. And then, without a word, she unfolded her legs, slid a little closer on the swing, and leaned her head on my shoulder. The sky had turned to deep, bruised orange and purple by then, the sun a fiery sliver on the horizon. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just sat there, feeling the warmth of her, the lightness of her trust. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like confetti or victory or grand courtroom apologies. Sometimes it's just this, sitting still on a porch in the quiet, while someone who never, ever felt safe in her entire life finally does. The leaves were falling, and the long, bitter summer was finally over.